Buenas noches. Welcome. Welcome to Bori Mix 2020. My name is Iris Morales, and tonight I have the pleasure of facilitating a conversation with two incredible artists who are promoting women super heroines and Black women at that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Edgardo Rodríguez Miranda, creator of La Borinqueña, and Thony Loui, creator of Tanama. Welcome. How are you feeling this evening?
Feeling great.
And how are your superheroines doing in this pandemic?
Well, my character La Borinqueña has been incredibly busy. The pandemic hasn't slowed her down via distributing PPE or getting involved in voter registration. She's been incredibly active out there, and because of her powers of flight, it's very easy for her to social distance.
Great. Great. And what about you, Thony?
Well, Tanama has been really busy too, and she's been publishing awareness messages in Haiti, billboards and flyers, brochures, and coloring sheets for the kids, so when they're at home, so they can color illustrations. And she's been collaborating with great public figures, Haitian figures, and artists to make awareness animation videos to teach people about the measures that we have to take in this tough period of time.
So, I'm very interested in the fact that we have two men that got interested in developing the superpowers of women. And we know that in our communities, women have always been the backbone of our families, of our neighborhoods, of our communities. And so for people that may not know about your characters, how did this aspect inspire your work and your creation? And how did you come to this idea of creating super heroines?
Edgardo, please.
Well, many of my mentors, and you included, Iris, are all women. I grew up with a single mother, and I, at a very young age, saw the power, the feminist power, the divine feminist energy that has been a part of my life and helped me tackle my role as a man in a patriarchal society. I bore witness to a lot of machismo, sexism, and I knew that I did not want to perpetuate that in any way. I'm a father of two sons, and one of the key things that I try to impart in my sons is a sense of equity, a sense of respect, but beyond respect, a sense of understanding the role and the position that we have. Although we may be progressive as men, we have to do our part to dismantle patriarchy and to really try to do our part to do away with all forms of toxic masculinity. As a storyteller who really loves comic books, I was very well aware and have been very well aware of the overwhelming patriarchal presence in comic book storytelling. Comic book storytelling here in the United States, they're predominantly told by white men and have been over the last 80 years. The majority of the characters are white men. But then my reality was graced by powerful women like yourself, Iris, women like my mother, women like my aunt Lilian de Jesus, women like Dr. Marta Monero Vega, women who really showed the power of creating institutions with their credentials and doing the work that really truly uplifts our community. And when I was creating La Borinqueña and the research that I did, I saw that there was so much powerful feminist energy in our island's history that was significantly overlooked. Tony is from Haiti. I'm from Puerto Rico. Throughout the entire Caribbean, we're connected by our Taino heritage. And the Tainos of the Caribbean had a mother goddess, Atabe. And Atabe is the divine energy, the divine goddess, the divine creator of the Tainos. And she literally is represented in an image of giving birth, which is the most powerful revolutionary act in all of creation. And as I looked and did my research further, because even though I create comic books, I do a lot of extensive research, reading books, reading articles, doing interviews, and I saw the threads that connected the role that women have played historically in Puerto Rico, from Matabex to the various cacicas like Yuisa, to Oblo, to historical figures like Lola Rodriguez de Tio, Mariana Bracetti, who have been a part of the nationalist history. So creating a Borinqueña, I always knew that it was going to be a woman. I always knew that it was going to be a woman that was going to deliver a message centered around decolonization, centered around environmental justice. And also, I knew that it was going to be a woman of African descent, an Afro Boricua, to really deal with the colorism, with the institutionalized prejudice and racism that exists in our heritage, in our Caribbean communities. And I think that
Okay, I'm going to
that's
stop
why it
you
was
right
important.
there. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you right there so that I can give Tony an opportunity for this, because I do want to get into that question that you just raised in your last statement. But I'm very interested in hearing about Tony's character, how she came to be, and how she was shaped by a
Well,
feminist legacy.
my story is a little bit similar as Edgardo. I've been raised by a single mother, and she's my she's my she's my backbone, as they say, you know, and she's the one, my biggest fan, I would say. And when I was studying fine arts in the Dominican Republic, I was fascinated by all the Taino sculptures that they preserve at the museum. And I know that this land, Hispaniola, is sometimes Haitians, like, they forget that the Tainos were the first um, people to live in this island, and they always talk about the Africans. And and I grew up with comic books, and I realized that in comic books, there's no female character that represents nature who's a good person. They're always bad guys, you know. And
Like Poison Ivy.
since yeah, exactly. Since in Haiti, little girls, they don't have models, really models, especially with pop culture right now, like everything they see in the videos. You know how a lot of men expose women, not expose, but how they um they project with women. It's it's not it's degrading. And I was like, why not creating a female superhero in order to uplift the young girls in my country, and black girls in general, to make them feel beautiful, not make them feel like, to let them know that they are beautiful and powerful, and they can be educated too at the same time.
Can you talk a little bit about you know her story, where she was born, what her family is like, where she gets her superpowers from, what are her superpowers?
Tanama was born in a farm. She's a farm girl in Haiti, and she's been raised by her mother and her father. They are farmers and living in the mountains. And one night, there's bad guys who came at the farm, which is a common story in Haiti, where people, like, get you out of your land or claim that the land is theirs. So I wanted to talk about it in the comic book. And what happened is she gets into a coma, and her aunt, with a group of women that works at the farm. I call them the sage femme, the wise women. So they took Tanama, which her name is Rachel, but later on she'll become Tanama, and I'll explain why. And they brought him into to the temple of the forest, where the spirit of the forest is located. and they placed her in on a duho, which is
And
a chair.
how old was she at this time, more or
Oh,
less?
she was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
She was 9 years old. And so all these women they prayed to the tree spirit to to give her life. So she spent the all the trees in the forest with their roots. They put Tanama into a cocoon, and she will become. They put Rachel in a cocoon, and she will become Tanama. Tanama means butterfly in Taino. So I
Yes,
really love the the process, the journey that a butterfly has in his life. I wanted to give it to Tanama to sense she's. I was inspired by the Taino culture most specifically, so I feel like Tanama is the perfect name for her since she's become so fabulous and amazing and beautiful.
that's dope. I like that. I love that.
That is a beautiful image. Can she fly?
Uh, she doesn't fly, but what I'm doing is not only I'm looking for research based on what the some some aspect of trees. Like she can talk with plants, she can talk with all the animals that actually are vegetarians, and she can teleport herself with the energy of the trees, and but along her story she becomes more aware of her powers, and the last thing she kind of discovers, if there's a lot of people in a room or in a place and they're hungry, if Tanama walks in, flowers begins to grow behind her to bring peace where there are anger and chaos. Mhm.
And so, how old is she now when we meet her?
Oh, Tanama is, well, I created Tanama 8 years ago. 8 years ago, but it's only in February that she was published. The world knew her in February,
But I mean, how
and
old is she in the story when we meet her now? When
oh
she, yeah,
oh in the story she's 19 years old.
okay, so she's like a young woman, a teenager, a young woman.
Hmm.
Okay, so Edgardo, I have a similar question for you, which is, where is La Borinqueña from?
So La
Uh,
Borinqueña is a uh, fictional character that is a native New Yorker. I wanted to create a character that was part of the Puerto Rican diaspora to try to do a work of art that would connect the 9 million Puerto Ricanos that live, 3 million on the island, and 6 million that live across the United States and the rest of the world. She's from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is the community that I live in. I very early on saw a lot of parallels between Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and parts of Puerto Rico. Both communities, Williamsburg has a historical Latin community, but both communities suffer from economic displacement, gentrification, environmental racism, and up to a point, even the Domino Sugar Factory, which recently closed a few years ago, not only did that facility provide a workplace for a lot of immigrants from Eastern Europe and parts of the Caribbean, but especially Puerto Ricanos. And a lot of the sugar cane themselves came from the Caribbean, particularly Puerto Rico. So I saw the historical connections between Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and Puerto Rico. So Marisol is actually a college student, 19, similar to Tanama, at Columbia University. She's studying her undergraduate in environmental sciences, and she goes to Puerto Rico for a semester abroad to do an extensive study in speleology, which is the study of caves. She's doing a paper for one of her courses in geology. But when she arrives in Puerto Rico, she realizes that due to the austerity measures that are being introduced by Promesa, the university has not only had to increase tuition, lost faculty, but many of the courses have had to be canceled. And since Marisol was a visiting student, she was not a priority. So therefore, the courses that she enrolled in weren't available. So she had to create her own independent study. She had to create her own makeshift laboratory in the back of her grandparents' cafe. And she started exploring various caves and started just collecting specimens. What she wasn't aware of is that the specimens that she were collecting after soaking in water for weeks were actual crystals. And when the crystals came together, it created an interdimensional portal that opened up a pathway between Puerto Rico and the realm where Atabex lives. And in connecting that and creating that portal, she was able to communicate directly with Atabex, who in turn introduced her to her twin sons of Yucahu and Huracan. And so Marisol received powers from Atabex and her twin sons to control the weather, to control and move the earth. And by manipulation of the weather and control of the weather, she's able to fly. She has superhuman strength because her strength, like Yukahu, comes from the seas and the mountains. And the star itself, the Taino word for star is Koea. So the star is technically a sentient being as well. And the star allows her to see the path, not to travel back in time, but more like a virtual reality experience, almost like having these like VR goggles, when she could kind of like see that she's in a space, but she doesn't actually interact. So she's able to see historical events, learn about her heritage, learn about her family, and her powers are superhuman, supernatural, but also based on knowledge.
You know, one of the things in looking at the work that both of you are doing is, and to your point before, how this industry has been controlled by a certain mindset that has reflected in the characters that they've created and in the enterprises that they've created. But in both your cases, your characters are part of something bigger and educational and philanthropic. And so, Thony, could you talk a little bit? Because I was fascinated when I saw that the character had all these other connections. Could you talk about that?
What do you mean about connections?
Well, the educational component, the connection to the farming,
Well,
those other pieces.
yes. And after creating Tanama, I met a fantastic human being. His name is Hugh Locke, and he has him and Timote. They own a organization called Smallholder Farmers Alliance, where they help the farmers in Haiti to grow plants. And when I met him, and he told me about what he's doing, and I thought it was a fantastic job, because a lot of time we forget about the farmers in the mountains, and we forget that they are the one giving us food, natural food too. Mm-hmm. And so it helped me build the Tanama's character. And I'm always fascinated by kids, and I love to give a workshop with kids. I do this with orphanages in Haiti, and I also wanted to have a superhero that can educate, that can tell the kids how much it is important to plant, how it is important to the agriculture of their country, and to make farming look cool. And so I think that's what motivated me to actually not only create a story about a fictional character, but also to incorporate educational material so kids can also learn while having fun reading something entertaining. And
I was really interested in the farming aspect because after Hurricane Maria, in Puerto Rico, not being able to trade with any other country, having to rely on the United States for food, and 80% of the food in Puerto Rico comes from outside of Puerto Rico. So in that situation, so a lot of young people, there's like returning to farming now, to recognizing the importance of food to our humanity, to our being able to live. And, it took a Hurricane Maria for really to drive that point home. And so when I saw that you were dealing with it, I thought it was something very, very important, because you start to develop these ideas in young people.
Yes.
So, Edgardo, I wanted to turn to you as well because I know that you have a variety of other activities uh, around La Borinqueña, in addition to the comic books.
So one of the things that we're dedicated to with our project is philanthropy. We had the opportunity a few years ago to team up with DC Comics, and La Borinqueña was able to be featured in an original book that we published through our studio Somos Arte with Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, and using the platform of these mainstream superheroes, we were able to magnified the work that we were trying to do, which was not only philanthropic and fundraising, but in advocacy and awareness. We wanted to bring to light the humanitarian crisis that was occurring in Puerto Rico, and not just something directly related to the impact of the hurricane in September of 2017, but the fact that this was endemic to the island's colonial state, and this was a part of the climate crisis that the entire planet is experiencing. The Caribbean is pretty much like the epicenter for world will react and also respond to the climate crisis, right? So in creating La Borinqueña, one of the key things we wanted to do was create a program that will provide resources to organizations in Puerto Rico. We were actually inspired by your work, Iris, because immediately after Hurricane Maria, you to Puerto Rico, and we're visiting with youth organizations across the island and grassroots organizations. So you technically set the groundwork in the sense that you were vetting these organizations that were legitimately making an effort to reconstruct and rebuild Puerto Rico. And your work, it really inspired us to say, with the money that we're raising from the sales of this book, because our relationship with DC allows us to license their characters for free under the condition that we donated all the proceeds from this book to our charitable work. So instead of just writing a check to just one large nonprofit, my partner, Kyung Miranda, came up with the idea of actually creating a grants program. And 2020 is actually our third year in our award cycle. And so far, we've awarded $165,000 in grants to nonprofit organizations across Puerto Rico. And we use our character legitimately as the gauge for how we fund and support organizations. And under Kyung's guidelines that she created for our grants program, we provide resources and grants to organizations that are committed to environmental justice, the preservation and celebration of Afro-Puerto Rican heritage, women's health and reproductive rights, sustainable farming, arts, and education for young people. And so we've been doing this over the course of 3 years since we started our grants program. And in addition to our philanthropic work, we also do a lot of advocacy. I do lectures across the United States at universities, museums, art galleries, elementary and public and private schools to bring the message of La Borinqueña, which truly really is around a conversation around everything from climate change to the history of Puerto Rico, a non-Puerto Rican audience. And using comic books, everyone loves comic books. They wear them as apparel, you play them as video games, you eat them as, energy bars or cereal boxes. It's pervasive. So it attracts an audience because people are curious about the superhero character. Once I get their attention, I really have a conversation where I engage them in a real talk around colonialism of Puerto Rico, climate change, and other issues that are very relevant and that are universal. That's not something very specific to Puerto Rico. These are issues that affect us all as humans.
I when I was preparing and reading about the work that both of you were doing, I had this fantasy, right? So this was my fantasy that because the Haitian Revolution is very important in Puerto Rican history. People don't always know that. I would say many people do not know that, and we'll get into why that is in a little bit. But I think it's so important to have these cross-cultural exchanges, these historical exchanges. So I had this fantasy that these two characters met and had an adventure together. Do you think there's a possibility for that, Thony?
Of course. Honored.
Edgardo?
Hey, anything is possible. I think one of the things that we're looking at here is this beautiful space where artists such as like Tony and myself are creating characters that are so similar, yet we're not in discourse with one another. We're not in communication. In fact, we're not even aware up until this event was produced by Bodymix, uh, that we could actually even have a conversation together. And the other thing that I think that's important, similar to the history of Haiti, is that Tanama and as well as La Borinqueña are both independent characters. These are not characters that are affiliated with corporations. Therefore, a conversation between myself and Tony is literally where the decision would come. We don't need to consult with a board of directors or with a corporate office or a branding office and all this other stuff. And it's just very powerful because I will say, in terms of the historical impact that this conversation has, is that right now we're in the midst of the 125th anniversary, this December 22nd, of the Puerto Rican flag. And that's important because Puerto Rico was a part of La Confederación Antillana, the Antillean Confederacy, which consisted of Puerto Rico, Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. And that was a confederation that existed in the late 1800s to overthrow Spain, to overthrow the European empire that was controlling the Caribbean. And it's unfortunate that a lot of this history, and it's no surprise because when an empire, when a colonial power takes over, the history is not only rewritten but it's deleted and omitted. But it's a shame that this history is not available and introduced to a new generation of young people. But with the magic of being storytellers like ourselves, is we can actually bring this conversation forth to show that the connections, to show, and it's powerful that Tanama as a character, her name exists, and her connection to the Taino heritage. When I do a lot of talks, Tony and Iris, I'm constantly talking about the Taino heritage that is the interconnecting thread throughout the entire Caribbean, as well as obviously our African lineage, as well as our European lineage. But como se dice, the Taino heritage is. It's just interesting that we both came up with that idea. Like I did not think of scientific origins for her superpowers. I didn't think of an intergalactic meteorite or an alien DNA that was going to give her powers. And the same thing with Tony. We both thought nature. We both thought our island's heritage. We both saw, and it's powerful because when you look at comic book stories, they're always referencing Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the Bible, Norse mythology. So if you're a person of color like us, a person of Caribbean descent, well, we have our own mysticism. We have our own mythologies. We just need to actually, I think it's crazy that it took like this millennium for people to finally create this. That this hasn't been happening for the last 100 years. Pero you know what? It's about time. Ya era hora. Ya es hora.
So Tony, I see you nodding your head in a lot of these things.
Yes.
So how do you see these connections between Haitian and Puerto Rican? What do you think about it going forward?
Oh, I think it's amazing what's happening right now, and just like Edgardo just mentioned about that's about time, and we have a rich culture, like Caribbean people. We are so warm. We are everything, even our food, and so to me it like it God does say it's about time, like to have characters, even if it's a fictional characters that can elevate the kids, the youth, and make them feel special, because we have a beautiful culture and the Taino too. If people knew how how much knowledge you can find in the stories of the Tainos, and how important it is, like to know about their story, and we can learn how to live with this planet through them, because they were in
Right.
harmony with the plants, with everything, and maybe we didn't, maybe because of the internet, maybe of the technology right now, it's easier for us to have a voice, and so people can hear us too. And so I think we should, and other artists too. Like I'm always saying that I'm always open for collaboration and to learn from other artists, because we our time is limited in this world. So what are we going to live for the next
Yeah.
generation? You know, for them
Yeah.
to continue the work. You know, because
I
hopefully
say that a
Tanama
lot.
will still be alive when I'm not here. You know, so that's the goal. You know, so the light can still be the flame can still be on. You
Right.
know,
I
the
believe
Yes,
that.
breath.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's the power of art.
The-
I mean, and I think in terms of like comic book characters, I think we see that the fact that these characters have been existing now for at least American characters, right? They've been around for over 80 years. They are outliving their creators. You know, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman, they passed away many years ago. Their character continues. Stan Lee, who recently passed away, their characters continue. Jack Kirby, their characters continues. I mean, the one thing that is important to point out though is that their characters don't stay in their family. Their characters are owned by corporations now. So it's easy for these characters to continue. And what we talk about, my partner and I, Kyung, what we always talk about is we're building up our sons, our family, so that they can continue this work, so that this always stays as part of our family and it doesn't become a corporate brand. You know, it doesn't become something that people in a boardroom are deciding what the character will look like or what she will stand for. It's something I think that's important, and in the power of recognizing independent storytelling. There's really some real significant power in that.
Well, in creating new paths, we don't do it alone, which is why I had this fantasy about these characters coming together and also opening up roads for other paths for other young folks that might be starting out and want to move in a certain direction, and you're creating a path that says you don't have to go corporate, you don't have to, sell shampoo in order to be, popular, that you can actually be bringing ideas that are helpful to ourselves and our humanity, but also to our planet. Right now
Right.
we need, more than ever, we need our indigenous teachings
Yes.
that
But
have been
I will interject one thing, Iris, and in order for a lot of these projects to survive, there is a room for a quote unquote shampoo, as long as it's something that's ecologically conscious. You know, if we associate ourselves with brands, like I know Tony, you've done some work with Timberland so that they can support your work. These are companies that are making a concerted effort to make a difference to better the environment. So it's different if we quote unquote forge alliances with companies, because they're coming to the creators directly. They're not
Right.
coming to a licensing company that's handing out the license for this character to that company and passing it around. It's coming to characters that are directly associated with real work. And that's what's powerful about the work you're doing. The work, your characters inspired by the agricultural lifestyles, farming in IT, but it actually really inspires people to actually plant trees, the reforestation of parts of IT, sustainable farming, and the that you've been able to partner with at the Farmers IT to this kind of effort, and the fact that this organization sees, wow, this is smart to work with a character, because that way it kind of like resonates with younger people. So that's the magic of these characters, and I think that's why, like here in the U.S., what I've been doing with La Borinqueña over the last few months for the election, La Borinqueña became the a voice to tell people, particularly young Latinx here in the United States, register to vote. You have to register to vote. Now there's a big election coming up in the United States that's going to happen in January. And the powerful thing about that is the impact that young people are going to make. Because if you're just turning 18 now, like if you turned 18 after November 7th election day, you couldn't vote, right? You turn 18 this month, and in December you can actually vote in January. So it's like mind blowing that, and they're like tens of thousands of unregistered voters that can now register to vote. And that's what we've been doing with La Borinqueña. We're like attaching her to campaigns. So it's not just about characters that are fighting these like mega maniacal villains, but it's more like, no, let's really use them as symbols of hope, symbols of change, symbols that really can inspire younger people to recognize the power that they have in themselves, or to paraphrase what Tony said earlier, to recognize the beauty that they already have. We're not showing them that they're beautiful. We're just like literally like reminding them that they already always have been beautiful, and that beauty is what is also part of their power.
Well, deconstructing the colonial mentality, because as Caribbean people, we've all been colonized.
Right.
And so we have these perceptions. You know, Frantz Fanon spoke about our colonized mentality and how it has to be deconstructed. So the artist always has this struggle between, you know, how to make a living and how to make art.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't meaning to say that there should be no, you know, you have to be poor in
No,
order
no,
to
I know
be
you weren't
art.
meaning that. And I know you weren't meaning that. But it's also important in this conversation to tell people that we have to, just as we have conversations around elections to hold elected officials accountable, we have to hold companies accountable, because companies make money off of our communities. They make money off of our countries. And if they're in our countries, and if they're in our community, then if we're the consumers, then we're really giving them the money. We're just saying, like, the money that we're giving you, if you're gonna do something in our community, this is what you should be doing in our community, and these are how these products should be created.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other body
Yeah,
mix.
a whole other conversation about the role of corporations. So I
Right.
don't really necessarily want to go there, but I do want to say that there are occasions where, you know, you can find that by partnering with somebody that has resources, you're able to advance your ideas without having to sacrifice. That was the main point of
Right.
what you believe and what it is that you're trying to get across. And we don't necessarily always know what those doors are and where those people come from or what those opportunities are. What we do know is that we have to keep our principles and our beliefs intact
Right.
in order not to be swallowed up.
Yeah.
Or, you
Yes.
know, and you know, Edgardo, you have faced some of those kind of monsters that come at us.
Yeah.
And so in this period, the reason I have this fantasy is because this is a period that has created great divisions,
Oh yeah.
even among people of color. And
Most certainly.
so for me, it would be very beautiful, as I said earlier, to see this unity with Haiti and Puerto Rico, given the long history that we've had. You know, we talked a lot about the Taino influence, and I wanted us to talk a little bit about the African influence,
Right.
which is also very important to, you know, our young people at this particular moment and to the world. Actually, with Black Lives Matter is a worldwide movement. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about the African influence in your characters and in your aesthetics, that kind of thing.
Well, one of the things.
Tony?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Tony. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Um, what I did too is for Tanama stories, I've been studying um, Haitian culture, the voodoo culture, and you know it's also taboo to in Haiti. And I had this conversation with a friend, and we were talking about how Harry Potter, for example, how this mystical world of wizards and monsters, how it's beautiful. It's a beautiful world, and you can find exactly the same attributes of a character in this world in Haitian culture too, but it's taboo. And
Exactly.
what we don't realize is um, it's how you put the message out there, and it's positive or negative. And we were talking about I don't know just Christianity, for example, or a lot of religion who did bad stuff for the world, you know. but it's
Exactly.
particular. Why? Because it's maybe a black country, or that they're really stigmatized it like that with the culture. And there's a lot of beautiful things in it too. So I try to I incorporate these culture and in these symbols too, that you find in African culture and Haitian culture, what they call the veve. They're like um, symbols that I now can draw them as I want to. And some historian was telling me that it's like now I'm able to write a language with these symbols, because I really am so fascinated by them. And
Can
I
you
think
give
it's
me an example of a symbol and its meaning and how you've used it?
um I probably should draw one for you, but what symbols? They're different. They're different. There's so many symbols in the Haitian mythology, I would say. And what I studied them for when I was studying fine arts in Altos de Chavon in La República Dominicana. And after studied them, and then now, like, it's like I'm doing this shape and the designs, and it actually looks like what they use for ceremony or anything like. But it's not really that, because I'm not using one in particular. So it's to me, it's very interesting to show the culture in the comic book. The Japanese have done it so many times, and there's a lot of things that they talk about energy, they talk about power of will, they talk about uplifting the mind, the soul, and you find everything in our culture too. So um, why not use our beautiful culture in order to make the kids feel that, oh, we have these things at home too, and they look beautiful, So I think it's very important to also put the African culture to in it, because we come from Africa. So I mean, Haiti is like really diverse, and it's a young nation. We all 200 years. It's not a lot, and but we have so many beautiful things that we can show through art. Yeah.
Thank you, Edgardo.
So one of the things we do with La Borinqueña is both philanthropically, we support organizations that work
Oh,
directly
thank
in the
you.
black community.
Edgardo. So beautiful.
That was fast, bro.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
um, so one of the things that we do through our philanthropic work, as I mentioned before, is that we support organizations that are committed to working to preserve Afro Puerto Rican heritage. Proactively, we're involved with the Black Lives Matter work. It's not something that for us is reactionary. We've always been supporting the Black Puerto Rican community since the beginning of our project. And that's just philanthropically. From a storytelling perspective, we reference and even illustrate La Borinqueña engaging in bomba, and bomba is folkloric music from Puerto Rico that is directly linked to our West African lineage and heritage. It's also the island's folkloric music, music that's very heavy with percussion, very heavy with storytelling, very much linked to the storytelling of the West African griot. So our character is very much engaged in that. And second, and then in addition, by creating a character that's illustrated to be Afro Puerto Rican is also something that it is very, very consciously done by us, because it is an underrepresented part of our heritage, an underrepresented part of our culture and our people. And as Puerto Ricanos, we are a multiracial people, and we can be Puerto Riqueño if we're black, if we are mestizo with Taino features, if we're white. So we have this wide range. So my argument was then black Puerto Rican will still represent Puerto Rican heritage, because that's a full representation of who our character and what our culture is.
And also the history of trying to wipe out our African heritage, our Africanness. You know, there has been a strong history, and actually that's when I mentioned the Haitian Revolution earlier. After the Haitian Revolution, the Spaniards, you know, got scared in Puerto Rico that there would be an uprising of blacks, and then entered into a vigorous policy of anti-blackness and of whitening the country, and the immigration laws and all of that. So in a way, we have to recover that history, and that's what I see La Borinqueña also does for Puerto Ricans. So we're coming to the close, and I had a question that I hope we can have a short answer, because then I have another question after that.
Okay, short answer then.
In 15 minutes. So you probably know that I'm a longtime feminist, and I was wondering if you would see your characters getting involved in issues of feminism, such as issues that directly impact women, such as workplace inequities, for example, or issues of reproductive injustice, like the sterilization of women that happens, testing, experimentation on Haitian and Puerto Rican women, or the uprising and killing of women that is taking place all over the Caribbean and Latin America. So I would like to hear both of you speak about that, because this is both these characters are so influential for our young women as the pioneers. And so we've spoken about, character, nature, race, and I just wanted to see how you felt about feminist organizing or incorporating those kind of ideas that are more difficult to tackle.
So what we do from a production standpoint, I have been making a concerted effort to bring more women to work on this project. We've been very fortunate that particularly these series of public service announcements that we promoted to get the vote out, with the exception of myself, everyone on the creative side was a woman. From Rosario Dawson, who did the voiceover work, to Maria Isa, who did the music, to the artistic team of Ana Teresa Rivera, Eliana Falcón, and Julis Tinoco, all were women who worked on that. And that's something that we made a concerted effort to put together, because if we're creating a character that is representative of the feminist energy of Puerto Rico and also of women in general, then we need to also make an effort to empower women in the comic book industry, in the animation industry, to give them opportunities to work with us. From a storytelling perspective, we are in the midst of completing our third graphic novel. And from a narrative perspective, not to give away too much of the actual story, but we're delving into history. And one of the core characters of our series is actually Marisol's grandmother. Marisol's grandmother is a survivor of La Operación, which concurrently was happening at the exact same time that pharmaceutical companies were testing and experimenting in so-called developing nations, as it was back then called third world countries, with these experimental birth control pills, right? So the DNA of Puerto Riqueñas are in birth control pills, which are available all over the world, right? So it's also connected, ironically, or maybe not, to the forced goodness.
Sterilization.
Yes, it's power. It's like pissing me off. But the women that were, women who have been trying to come in with their families to the United States under this administration. We talk about children. We're talking about the children, right? We're talking about children that are being detained in cages and are being kept away from their families. But we also, in that same space, have to talk about the women that are being detained because they're illegally being tested. They're illegally being experimented on in 2020. It's atrocious that something like that. It's atrocious, right? It's atrocious that the sterilization of women, that was something that was once looked upon historically in the 50s into the 60s, is something that's happening 60 to 70 years later this year. So this is something that we've been very aware
Well,
of, and we've
actually,
tried
the
to.
sterilization of women has not really stopped because incarcerated women, even in this country, face sterilization. It's just some of these things come to light, and sometimes they hide, and then sometimes they pop up.
Yeah.
So, and it's like what we know and what we don't know, right? So, like I know that when we first learned about sterilization in 1965, when I first learned, it had been happening since the 30s, and it was tied to a eugenics movement,
Right.
but
Exactly.
didn't know it. So that's why I asked the question, because it's important for us to keep the story going. And I'm glad that to hear that, Edgardo.
Thank you.
Tony, what about you?
Well, in Tanama's story, and she's surrounded with wise women that they call femme sage, and it's in order it's to show how powerful women can be if they work together, and also in farming, we, based on statistics, we realize that women works harder than men in farms. So it's Tanama is promoting that too, gender equality, and also promote women to value more the women in the farm because they work more than men,
Exactly. And
and
they paid less.
and they pay less. Yeah, that's true. So in Tanama stories, that's one of her mission to talk about these issues. And and the launching of Tanama, I was with the collaboration of She Builds. It's a network of women, and I'm gonna say that it's funny that I was telling that to a friend that I find myself in conferences with women, and I'm the only man because I'm talking about Tanama, And it's interesting to see their point of view and to get accepted, by them too as a male, And because I'm really serious about the Tanama project, and since I was raised by my mother, I know how it is hard, to raise a child and to live in Haiti, all the difficulties that she has to face and she's still facing, and it's very important to to take care of a woman, to glorify a woman. I'm really up for that. You know.
Well, thank
Well,
you. I'm very pleased to hear these storylines, and I'm sure others will develop as you go along. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how people can find out about your work, learn about what you're doing, and what you may have coming up that we can give a sneak preview to the audience that's come to listen. Tony?
Well, well, for Tanama, on Instagram, it's tanama.project, and you can read the comic book for free online. It's in Creole and English, soon in Spanish. It's www.tanamaproject.org, and people can also follow me at Thony Loui, ThonyLoui, and to find more about the work. And there's a lot of good things coming. And I also we talked about, I mean, briefly, I want to thank Timberland too, because they see the vision that I have with Tanama, and about the tree planting, and now I'm now a brand ambassador for Timberland because of Tanama. So it's really amazing to see how powerful an idea can be and art can be. You look at La Borinqueña, and I remember I was in New York. I was 3 years or 4 years ago, and it was an exhibit, and there was that Borinqueña on the wall. So it was, I don't remember where, it's in Bronx or in Brooklyn, and I was looking at the illustration, and then I was like, I want to meet that guy one day. I want to talk to him. That's amazing. So I'm very
And
That's
honored
dope. That's
to.
dope. That's dope.
and here you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are, man. Here we are. In terms of what we're working on, we are looking to release a vinyl record and comic book in December to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the Puerto Rican flag that was created here in New York City 125 years ago. That's going to be a remake of the song Que Bonita Bandera. It's going to feature an incredible roster of musicians, led by producers DJs Stretch and Babito, and also featuring 8-time Grammy Award winner Eddie Palmieri. We're also finishing up production on our third graphic novel. And also happy, even though it's not directly related to La Borinqueña, I just finished wrapping up your first children's book, Iris, Vicky and A Summer of Change, y Un Verano de Cambio. I'm very proud of that because the creative team that actually works on La Borinqueña actually worked on your first children's book. So I think one of the most important things to do when you kind of talk about next project is also to kind of like give praise to other people's work and other people's projects, because I think that's just like as you were alluding to the possibility of myself and Thony collaborating. It's beautiful when there is collaborative efforts, because there's more power that's disseminated, more opportunities that are created, and also I think the people who really benefit the most are the youth, children benefit because there are more stories that can be shared, more stories that can be told. You know.
I always have found that it's important to create networks among people who are doing similar work, and artists especially. Years ago, before when people of color were really kept out of the film industry, there was an independent film in a lot of collectives, Black Filmmakers Collective, the Latino Filmmakers Collective. It was a way to exchange information, to exchange experiences, contacts, to learn from each other.
Right.
Oh, I don't know how to do this. Can you tell me how to do that? Or I've got this contact here. I think they'd be interested in you. And those networks are very important. And sometimes I think that we're losing them in a time where everything is so me oriented.
Mm.
So I'm very pleased for this conversation tonight. I feel very honored to have had this opportunity to speak with both of you and hear your ideas. I think you really are projecting the wave of the future, because we all have different talents and we have to use our talents and our tools to really advance our communities and our humanity and doing the stuff that we love. What's
Yeah.
better than that, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I want to give you, I think we're almost done. So I want to give you like 30 seconds each to give your any concluding remarks.
Go ahead, Godwin.
Well, I want to thank you, Iris, because you have been an incredible part of my life for more than half of my life. You've helped me with my not only my professional development, but my political education. And it's something that I've been able to translate not only into my work through my books, La Borinqueña, and my public speaking, but also through my parenting. It's an opportunity to share always with my sons and my wife. And I think the most important message, particularly, is that even though we're isolated from each other, that should not stop us from communicating with one another.
Yeah, we take this as an opportunity to Zoom everything, and I
Exactly.
appreciate your beautiful family.
Thank you.
Tony.
Well, me, I'm honored and grateful and to be here with you guys tonight, and it really encourages me to do more, to continue. I remember people telling me that I'm just doing cartoons and see how things are the character can impact people, and I'm here with like two amazing people tonight, and I don't know, I'm happy. That's all I can say. And and
That's all it
please,
is. And it is
uh,
happiness,
yeah, and
love and
continue
happiness.
to share the light and tree planting, encourage the women, and hopefully people will learn from this conversation and grow spiritually too
Amen.
afterwards.
I agree. I agree. Thank you,
Thank
Thony.
you. Thank you. So I think we're at the end of our body mix time. And I want to thank the audience who came to hear us. And please send your comments to the Body Mix organizers, and I want to thank them as well.
Can I do
Thank
something?
you.
Yes, yes.
I take a screenshot of you guys.
Oh, yes,
Sure,
yes.
go for it.
absolutely.
I want to do one too. Hold up. Where's my screen? Okay, here we go.
I don't know how
Ready?
to do it, so you all have to send it to me.
1, 2, 3. There you go. I got it.
Okay. So you can send
I'll
it
send
to
it to
me
you.
because I don't know
Yeah.
how to do that. I'm of another generation. I'm still learning some stuff. I'm trying to keep up.
Gotcha.
All learning.
Cool.
Just
Thank you, guys.
learning is lifelong.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The new selfie, somebody says, the new selfie, yes. So I guess it's a wrap.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Thank
a
you so
wrap.
much. Thank you so much, Iris. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you. This was great. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Hey,